Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be exploring A Society. It's a short story by Virginia Woolf.
Yeah.
And we're going to be listening to some snippets of Frank Marcopolos' audiobook performance as well. Are you ready to jump into this?
Oh, absolutely. A Society is just such a fantastic example of Woolf's genius, you know?
Yeah.
She just blends this satire and humor to really tackle some big questions about gender and intellect and societal norms.
Yeah, definitely. And I think before we even get into the story itself, can you just give us a quick overview of Virginia Woolf?
Sure.
Just enough to kind of set the stage for her.
Absolutely. So Virginia Woolf was a leading figure in English modernist literature in the early 20th century.
Okay.
She was known for her very experimental style and these really insightful examinations of consciousness. She was a feminist, a critic of social norms, and a brilliant writer.
Yeah.
And A Society, published in 1921, really exemplifies her exploration of these themes.
Okay, perfect. So let's jump right into the story then.
Okay.
It all starts with a group of women having tea and discussing,
Yes.
of all things, how wonderful men are.
Yes. But then one of the women, Paul, breaks down in tears. And it turns out her father left her a fortune, but with a catch.
Oh.
She had to read every single book in the London Library.
A catch. That sounds like a bookworm's dream come true. What's so tragic about that?
Well, that's the irony. After reading all this great literature,
Right.
Paul comes to a shocking realization.
Right.
Most of it is actually
Oh, no.
quite terrible.
Oh.
And this sends the other women into a tailspin.
Right.
They've always accepted men's intellectual superiority without question.
Right.
And now their whole world is upside down.
So they decide to form this society to figure out
Yeah.
if men are really as great as they've been led to believe.
Exactly. They call themselves a society, and their mission is to investigate whether men are truly producing the good people and the good books that society expects of them.
It sounds almost like an undercover operation.
You could say that they use their own experiences and observations as their primary sources.
Yeah.
They send members undercover into all sorts of male-dominated spaces. Warships, scholars' studies, business meetings.
Wow.
It's almost like social anthropology, but with a healthy dose of humor.
I love that about Woolf, tackling these complex issues in such clever and entertaining ways.
Yes.
So as we're kind of going through this deep dive,
Okay.
what are some of the key moments or discoveries that we should be paying attention to?
Keep an eye out for Paul's disillusionment with literature and how it affects the group.
Okay.
Also, pay attention to the methods that the women use to investigate men. They're often hilarious and reveal a lot about societal expectations.
Perfect. And those interactions with those men.
Oh.
I bet there's some interesting characters that we're going to encounter along the way.
Oh, absolutely. There's the pompous naval captain who is obsessed with honor.
Okay.
A professor so engrossed in his studies, he's practically oblivious to the world around him.
Oh, wow.
And artists who take themselves far too seriously.
It's funny because her characters are always so richly drawn.
Yes.
Even when they're satirical.
Yes.
And I just find it fascinating how she uses those characters to kind of expose society's absurdities.
Yes.
And these contradictions that exist.
Yes. And she does it with such a sharp wit.
Yeah.
For instance, one of the members, Rose, disguises herself as an Ethiopian prince
Okay.
to challenge the captain's ridiculous notions of honor.
Yeah.
This scene is a great example of Woolf's humor at work.
I can already imagine that scene playing out.
Yes.
And speaking of playing out, I'm curious to see how Marcopolos handles that in the audiobook.
Oh, his narration really shines in moments like this.
Okay.
His deep, resonant voice and impeccable comedic timing perfectly capture the pompous bluster of the captain.
Wow.
You can practically hear him sputtering with indignation.
So he's really bringing these characters to life.
He really is.
That's great. So we have this satirical exploration of men and their greatness. What other themes or storylines should we be looking out for?
Well, the story also delves into the changing social landscape of the time, particularly around ideas of chastity. It's a bit of a powder keg in the story.
Right.
One of the members, Castalia, returns from her research trip to Oxbridge with some unexpected news.
Oh, no. What happened?
She's pregnant.
Wait, what? But they vowed not to have children until their investigation was complete.
I know.
What happens next?
It throws the entire group into a frenzy.
Oh, my gosh.
They debate whether Castalia should be allowed to stay,
Wow.
whether she's somehow impure now.
Okay.
It's a fascinating glimpse into early 20th century anxieties and societal norms.
So Woolf is taking these complex topics like gender,
Yes.
societal expectations, chastity,
Right.
and she weaves it into a story that's both entertaining and thought-provoking.
Exactly. She doesn't shy away from challenging the status quo,
Yeah.
but she does so with a wit that makes her critique all the more impactful.
Now, I'm particularly intrigued by this character, Judith, who is investigating scientific matters.
Oh, yes.
Sounds like she has some pretty radical ideas.
Judith is definitely a firecracker. She's developed an invention for, to put it delicately, dispensing with prostitutes and fertilizing virgins by act of parliament.
Whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You're going to have to unpack that one for me.
Essentially, Judith has come up with a system for artificial insemination.
Okay.
She envisions a world where men's germs, as she calls them,
Right.
are preserved in tubes,
Wow.
readily available for women to use as they see fit.
Wow, that's incredibly forward-thinking for the early 20th century.
It is.
How does Woolf handle such a sensitive and potentially controversial topic?
With her signature blend of satire and insight, it's a clear jab at the anxieties surrounding reproduction, technology, and the shifting roles of men and women in society.
I'm curious how Marcopolos navigates this in the audiobook.
Oh, he does it brilliantly. His delivery is dry, almost clinical as he explains Judith's invention, which adds another layer of humor to this already outrageous concept.
Okay.
It's a perfect example of how his narration amplifies the satire in Woolf's writing.
So we've got undercover investigations, shocking revelations about men and their works,
Yes.
and a radical invention for baby making.
That's right.
Is there anything else that Woolf kind of throws into the mix here?
Well, just as the society seems to be making headway in their investigation, the outside world intrudes in a major way. World War I breaks out.
Oh, no. How does the war affect their mission?
It throws everything into disarray.
Okay.
Their focus shifts from scrutinizing men's intellect to grappling with the forces that lead to such destructive behavior.
Right, because it's almost as if the war itself represents the ultimate failure of male intellect and rationality.
You could definitely interpret it that way.
Yeah.
The story concludes with Castalia questioning whether their entire belief in men's intellectual superiority was the greatest fallacy of them all.
That's a powerful statement.
It is.
It seems like their journey of discovery leads them to even more uncertainty.
It does. And that's precisely what makes a society such a powerful and enduring work. It raises questions that resonate just as strongly today as they did a century ago.
It's amazing how a story written so long ago can still feel so relevant today.
It speaks to Woolf's genius and her deep understanding of human nature. But before we dive too deeply into those broader implications, let's take a closer look at some of the specific events and characters that make a society such a compelling read.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so picking up where we left off, one character we haven't talked that much about is Castalia's daughter, Anne.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, she becomes the president of the Society of the Future at the end of the story.
Right. And I think it's almost as if Woolf is passing the torch to this new generation.
Yes.
Right. And they're going to grapple with these big questions about gender and society that these current members are kind of struggling with.
And the timing of Anne's appearance is key. The story ends as the peace treaty is signed after World War I.
Okay, so we're in this transitional period, war-torn world, trying to rebuild, shifting gender roles.
Yes.
And now this new generation is stepping onto the scene.
Right.
What do you make of Anne's arrival?
It's a complex symbol, full of hope, but also uncertainty.
Okay.
What will Anne make of the world she's inheriting, especially given her unusual upbringing?
Well, and especially because Castalia tries to shield her from the world's harsh realities.
She does.
She even discourages her from learning to read.
Which is ironic, considering Paul's disillusionment with reading sparked the entire story.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's almost as if Castalia has come full circle.
Yes.
She starts by believing in the power of knowledge.
Yes.
But now she sees it as a potential threat to innocence and happiness.
That's true.
But yet, despite Castalia's efforts, Anne shows signs of curiosity.
She does.
She's caught with a newspaper, asking questions about the world.
That's right.
It's almost evocative, this image of this child representing the future, seeking knowledge despite the attempts to keep her sheltered.
And it suggests that the pursuit of truth is ultimately irresistible.
Yeah.
No matter how hard we try to protect ourselves or others from it.
What will that truth look like for Anne?
Right.
Will she inherit this society's cynicism?
That's the question Woolf leaves us with. It's an open ending, full of possibilities.
Which makes it all the more thought-provoking.
Yes.
We're left to imagine what Anne's society of the future might become.
Will it be a society embracing equality and
Right.
challenging gender roles?
We'll learn from the past,
Right.
finding this balance between knowledge and innocence.
Absolutely.
Oh, such profound questions. It feels like we're being invited to imagine a better world alongside Woolf.
Absolutely. She's not giving us answers, but food for thought, sparking a conversation that continues beyond the page.
Now, I want to talk about Marcopolos' narration.
Okay.
And how he shapes our understanding of Anne.
So his performance throughout the story is marked by this dry wit and a slight detachment.
Okay.
But when he reads passages about Anne, there's a subtle shift.
I noticed that too.
Yeah.
It's almost as if he brings a touch of warmth and tenderness to his voice.
Exactly. That shift is crucial to how we interpret Anne. She's not just a symbol, but a child with potential.
Yeah.
And Marcopolos helps us see that.
It reminds us that even in a story filled with satire and critique,
Yes.
there's room for hope.
There is.
And speaking of hope, I'm struck by how Anne contrasts with the disillusioned members of the society.
Yes, they started by praising men, but ended up questioning everything they thought they knew.
Right.
Anne, on the other hand, is a blank slate, open to possibilities.
So perhaps she represents a chance for genuine change, unburdened by the cynicism of previous generations.
That's one way to read it.
Okay.
And Marcopolos' narration hints at that potential, that untainted hope Anne embodies.
It's like he's inviting us to believe in the possibility of a better future. So let's delve into the literary aspects of a society.
Okay.
What are some of the major themes at play here?
Gender roles are front and center. Woolf challenges traditional notions of masculinity and femininity.
Okay.
Particularly concerning intellect and creativity.
And the entire story hinges on women being excluded from those realms.
Exactly.
To the point they need a secret society to investigate them.
That silencing of women's voices is a recurring theme in Woolf's work.
And she also kind of links those gender roles to this broader social and political landscape.
She does.
You know, the outbreak of World War I really disrupts their mission.
Yes, the war becomes symbolic of the destructive consequences of patriarchal power structures.
So beyond gender, what other themes are present?
The story also satirizes intellectualism and the pursuit of knowledge.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Because Paul's disillusionment with literature sets the tone.
Yeah.
And it's as though Woolf is poking fun at the pretensions of the intellectual elite.
There's definitely playful irreverence there, but also a deeper point about the limits of knowledge.
Okay.
The dangers of blind faith in reason.
Okay.
Without considering empathy or emotional intelligence.
It's a cautionary tale about knowledge without compassion.
Yes.
Particularly relevant in the early 20th century with its rapid advancements and social upheavals.
Precisely. Now, in terms of literary merit, a society exemplifies Woolf's experimental style and sharp wit.
Absolutely. I mean, her use of satire and this ability to weave these complex ideas into a seemingly simple narrative is just masterful.
And her characters are both believable and absurd, representing different facets of society in a way that makes us both laugh and recognize ourselves in them.
And it brings us back to that open ending.
Right.
You know, we're left wondering what Anne's society of the future will be like.
Right.
Is that open ending a strength or a weakness?
It's both.
Okay.
It's frustrating to be left hanging.
Yeah.
But it forces us to actively engage with the story's themes. We're not told what to think, but invited to think for ourselves.
And I think that's the mark of great art.
It is.
Is that it stays with you long after you finish experiencing it.
Absolutely. What about you? What takeaways from a society have resonated with you?
Well, for me, it's how Woolf uses humor to address such serious issues. It reminds us that even when we're discussing gender inequality and the limits of knowledge, we can find moments of joy and laughter.
That's a beautiful point. It's as if she's saying that even amidst absurdity and disillusionment, we can still find lightness and connection.
And that makes a society so enduring. It's not just social critique, but a celebration of the human spirit.
Absolutely.
You know, our resilience, our questioning nature, and our capacity for hope, even in those dark times.
Beautifully put. Now, let's talk a bit about the audiobook narration.
Yes, Marcopolos' performance is truly captivating.
He captures both the humor and pathos of Woolf's writing so effectively.
And his pacing is perfect. He knows when to speed up for absurdity and slow down for a moment's wait.
It's like he's conducting us through the story's emotional landscape. And his voice is so soothing, so engaging.
He makes listening to such complex ideas feel like a cozy fireside chat.
Oh, great.
Even though the content is anything but simple.
Exactly. That's what makes his narration so special. He makes challenging ideas accessible and engaging.
Right.
Inviting us to lean in and truly listen.
And especially given how dense and experimental Woolf's writing can be.
Yes.
He's truly a master of his craft.
As we wrap up part 2.
Yeah.
What has particularly resonated with you in this exploration of a society? What stands out in your mind?
One thing that keeps coming back to me is Judith's invention.
Yeah.
Such a bold concept.
Yes, it is.
And Marcopolos' delivery of that section is just perfect. It's funny.
Yes.
But also deeply thought-provoking.
I agree. It speaks to the anxieties and possibilities of a changing world. But before we delve further into that, let's pause here and pick up on those threads in our final part.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Virginia Woolf's I, Society. As we wrap up, I'm struck by how relevant its themes still feel today, even though it was written over a century ago.
It's amazing how a society continues to spark these conversations about gender roles and societal expectations and the nature of knowledge and power.
It feels like we're still grappling with many of the same questions Woolf was exploring. Have we really made any progress?
That's a complex question. You know, we've seen these incredible advancements in women's rights and representation.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. We have women leading countries, heading major corporations, and making these groundbreaking discoveries in every field.
That's true. But at the same time, we still see these persistent inequalities.
Yeah.
These ingrained biases and pushback against progress.
Right.
It sometimes feels like taking 2 steps forward and then 1 step back, especially with issues like reproductive rights.
Yeah.
And the resurgence of these outdated gender stereotypes.
It's a constant struggle, but a society reminds us that this fight is worth having.
Woolf challenges us to keep questioning and pushing for change and never taking the status quo for granted.
It's a call to action both on a societal level and a personal one.
Exactly. She highlights how the personal is political.
Yeah.
The choices we make, how we raise our children, the conversations we have, all these things shape the society we live in.
That's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
It's not just about these grand political gestures, but also about our everyday actions and how they contribute to a more just and equitable world.
That's where the legacy of a society really shines. It's not just a story about a group of women in early 20th century England. It's about all of us and our shared responsibility to create a better world.
Now, in the story, Woolf portrays men and their creations in a somewhat negative light. Does that weaken her message? Is she being unfair to men?
Well, it's important to remember that Woolf is writing from a feminist perspective.
Okay.
One deeply critical of the patriarchal structures of her time.
Right.
She's using satire to expose those structures and the power dynamics they perpetuate. So she's not striving for objective balance.
Right.
But rather highlighting the absurdity of a system that often marginalizes women and their voices.
Exactly. And many issues, she points out, like the glorification of war, the obsession with material wealth, and the silencing of women's voices, sadly, are still relevant today.
It's not about saying all men are bad or all their creations are terrible. It's about questioning the systems that have allowed certain types of masculinity and knowledge to dominate for so long.
Precisely. She's pointing out the flaws in the system itself.
Let's bring it back to Marcopolos' narration. How does his performance add to the legacy of a society?
Well, his ability to make Woolf's complex writing accessible to a wider audience is crucial.
Yeah.
He bridges the gap between high literature and the everyday listener.
His narration makes the story feel personal and relatable, even when dealing with these challenging themes.
And his subtle shifts in tone, the humor, the irony, the tenderness, it all deepens our understanding of the nuances in Woolf's writing.
He gives us permission to laugh, cry, question, and feel everything the story evokes.
He's not just reading, he's bringing the words to life, connecting them to our own experiences.
He's truly a collaborator, helping us unlock Woolf's brilliance.
As we wrap up, I keep coming back to Castalia's suggestion at the end.
Yeah.
Cassandra, for heaven's sake, let us devise a method by which men may bear children. It is our only chance.
That's such a provocative statement.
Yeah.
What do you make of it?
On the surface, it's a humorous jab at the burdens of motherhood.
Right.
But I think it also speaks to the need for a fundamental shift in power dynamics between genders.
It's as if she's saying that until men experience childbirth's physical and emotional realities,
yes,
they can't truly understand what it means to be a woman in this world.
And that empathy is essential for creating a more just and equitable society.
It's a radical idea, but also deeply thought-provoking. It makes us question assumptions about gender roles,
Yes.
the division of labor, and even the very nature of what it means to be human.
Exactly. A society is a story that pushes us to think differently, to imagine new possibilities, and keep striving for a better future.
And Marcopolos' narration amplifies that message, making it all the more impactful and inspiring.
Absolutely. To our listeners, we encourage you to keep diving deep, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going. What would a world where men bear children look like? What does your society of the future hold?
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those minds buzzing.